Well, my Rife machine is way beyond a Rife machine. Rife is a scientist named Royal Rife, and he built the first 30,000 times microscope to see viruses live under the microscope. And what Rife did is he developed a study into transmitting frequencies through a very high quality emitter. An emitter is a device that actually emits or transmits frequencies into the body and into biology. And because our body is electrical, you can take a voltmeter and you can plug your fingers on the end of the nodes of the voltmeter, and you can see, as I'll do here in just a second. Oh, I just lost my pendant, which just fell off of me. My kids are really wild, and they broke the chain on that. So what you do is you take a common voltmeter like this one. This is a really good one. And you turn it on to the volt section. And we're going to read the millivolts, which is a thousandth of a volt on my fingertips. If I wet my fingers, I can see I have lots of activity on my voltmeter, on my fingers. Let's just get rid of the reflections there. You can see tons of activity there. And that's because the body, the heart, the lung, the organs are pumping, electrical charges that's basically running the heart, running the lungs, running everything in the body. With electricity. And voltage is the difference. Like, the best way to describe difference is you put a teeter-totter and you put a little bowling ball right here, and if there's no difference, the bowling ball won't roll down my arm, right? I know I have a bowling ball around here somewhere, but if I tilt this and I create a difference between the point A and point B, the ball is going to roll down. Mm-hmm. And basically electrons, which are the carriers of the electromagnetic force, when you create difference, they'll move current, and the current is expressed as amps. And so the current moves through the voltage. And if you don't have voltage, you don't have current. And if you don't have current, you don't have voltage. So really, in a lot of ways, they're the same thing, but they get different expressions. So because the body has voltage and it has resistance, you go to the next setting on your voltmeter, which is a little Greek omega symbol, which is for ohms. You measure the resistance in the body, same way, plug into 2 points, and right now my resistance is 2 ohms right now, for example. So now when electricity and current is moving through a system of wires or nerves in the body, the resistance to that forward motion causes radiation. It causes a magnetic field to be born. So firstly, for scientists to say that there's no aura around the human system is actually absurd. And a lot of scientists say that. If you know anything about electricity, wherever there's electricity, there's resistance. And wherever there's resistance, there's a magnetic field. Albeit the human system has a very weak magnetic field in most cases. Not all humans have the same strength of magnetic field. It depends on your state of meditation and your state of chi and life force energy moving through your body. So with the field that comes off the body through the resistance to the current and the voltage in the body, you are receptive to receive frequencies. So what Rife was doing is he was looking at viruses under the microscope, and he tested frequencies, and he found certain frequencies which shatter or destroy the life of the virus. And he cataloged hundreds of diseases, and he did this live. The thing that Rife did is he used a very good emitter. So you punch in a number, which is a number of waves per second, which is the frequency measured in hertz, and you run it through an amplifier, and depending on the quality of the amplifier, the signal at that frequency will either be pure or impure. And then you go to an emitter. And the emitter is very interesting because there's so many different types of emitters. And an emitter, whatever it's made out of, will produce an ion. An ion is a element on the periodic table, like, for example, let's take lithium. And all atoms are said to be net zero charge. They don't have a charge on them. So if they have a leftover additional negative or positive charge, they'll generate an ion. And the nervous system loves ions, and in fact, it lives on them. And so basically, Your food ionizes in your stomach. You ingest a bunch of electrolytes, and that's what an electrolyte is. It's basically something that ionizes very well in the body and gives you energy. And then you have vitamins and minerals and proteins and RNA and DNA and all kinds of stuff, going into the body. So you look at the physical aspect of healing, but then when you look at the energetic aspect of healing, you're looking at the charges that different materials give off into the body. So if you ingest iron, you're going to get iron ions. And, so it's not just the food that you're living on, you're living off the charge. So when I look at emitters, I look at what are these emitters made out of? Well, Rife used gas tube emitters. And why did he use a gas tube emitter? Because the electrons in a gas are in a free state where if you apply an electric charge to the electrons in the gas, they get excited really easily and they'll ionize very easily. The problem is you're only going to get an ion of that particular gas. So I figure gas ions are not really that good. They're okay. But believe it or not, today when you search Rife machine, the cheapest ones are just a metal probe that using a very cheap solid state amplifier. So you got a very low quality signal. There's your emitter right there, those glowing tubes, right? So basically most of Rife's frequencies, because in his time, the ability to transmit accurate frequencies beyond the audible spectrum was not very good, although you can do it for sure. But he found most of the healing frequencies were within the range of what we call, hearing or human hearing, and a little bit below human hearing. So humans hear from 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz, and I really doubt whether most humans can hear 20,000 hertz today because of all the background noise we have in our cities. So this is a machine. How much is this machine, for example, here? Click on that one there, and if they're hiding the price, it means it's probably really a lot. So click on that one, buy now, standard packaging. And they're really, yeah, $3,500, $2,600. So first of all, our product isn't even that expensive. And their emitter is really cheap. They call them handheld ray tubes. So they're probably noble gas. Yes, it says right there, noble gas. So right away, when I see noble gas, I think of argon, neon, different gases. And I'm not interested in those ions. I'm not interested in a noble gas ion. It's the frequency itself has a property, but believe it or not, the ion it emits is far more important than the frequency itself. So at the frequency, the frequency is going through. That's a really cheap solid state amp in that box. I know those amps. And if you listen to those signals with headphones, you can tell how cheap the quality of the signal is. I've gotten really good, $400 headphones, and I've listened to some of these devices and I've listened to their signals, and they're so cheap. The quality of the signal is garbage. So, but it's true, Rife used gas tube. And I think even in Rife's time, he wasn't really as knowledgeable as he could have been, but he's a great discoverer. He discovered certain frequencies have a certain effect on, demobilizing certain viruses. See, when you see a box like that, that is the cheapest amplifier of the frequency, of the desired frequency. That is pure garbage. That's $20 to have that made in India or somewhere in Asia. I mean, these things don't cost anything to. It's just a little belt. Yeah, that's just an electrode. So now let's go to electrodes, because Rife emits frequencies passively, meaning not with an electrode. Yeah, and these are electrodes. Okay. And that thing costs $20 to make. So they're charging $1,000 for it. It doesn't cost anything to make that. And I bought those. Believe me, I bought these and I've tried them on me. And what I found is you don't want to electrocute the nervous system through the skin. So essentially what you're doing is, let's say you're running 3 to even 12 volts at very low current, through the body. And so the voltage and the current are electrifying the nerve. And when you electrify a nerve, you're basically heating it up. You're transferring energy. And when you measure the natural current and voltage of the body, the current is in the is in the microamps, which is a millionth of an amp. And the voltage is in the millivolts, which is a thousandth of a volt. So you take volts times amps equals watts. So that's how you know how much energy is being burned. So the very fact that the body is in millivolts, you know, let's say you have 30 millivolts on your fingertips, or you can measure on your earlobes, which is a common place to measure voltage in the body because the brain is right here. And most of the current in the body is in the heart and the lung, and then there's less in the brain. Studies have proven that the magnetic field of the heart is at least 4 times bigger than the brain. So if the magnetic field is bigger, then the electricity is stronger in the heart. So, but the bottom line is you don't want to put in more voltage and current than is already there, because then you're overloading the system. Mm-hmm. And so I believe there's a reason Rife himself didn't use electrodes, meaning electrocuting the skin like this device here. So I wouldn't use anything like that. I'm more impressed by packaging, little knobs and buttons and lights and dials. So, but I look at what it's actually made out of. So you look at, these are very, very small little amps. You're using the pad, so that's electrodes. So you're electrocuting the skin. And there, you know, there's even these muscle stimulation pads are electrocuting the nerves to vibrate the muscle, right? So they're putting way more current and volts in the body than the body naturally has. So I don't want to upset the balance of the body. I want to get the frequencies in there, but I also want to get really good ions. So it doesn't matter how many Rife machines you look at, from the really cheap ones to the more expensive ones. The more expensive ones use a better emitter, and they use a better amplifier. And that's why they cost more. So I decided I didn't like any of the amplifiers on any, and that's what everybody does. They either have the probe emitter, which you hold on to, but even the ones you hold on to that are gas tube, it's passive. You're not electrocuting the skin because it's not an electrode. Right. So basically, these are really cheap. I mean, the amplifiers in these, in my opinion, are garbage. I want a good signal. So what I did, the amplifier we use, which is a small tube amp, and you can pick your amplifier. The little Kinpu, I put a pair of really good AKG headphones on my head, and I listened to some of my favorite songs, and which have a lot of different dynamics and frequencies in a song, and I was astounded. You know, I have a $5,000 set of speakers at home, and with my headphones, the sound on that little amp was comparable to the quality of the sound. That means the quality of my signal's really good. And tube amps tend to be better than solid state. Unless you want to spend $3,000 on a solid state amp, the cheaper solid state amps are no good. They're not good quality signal processors. And so music is all signals, right? So I picked a tube amp, and that's why we separated. Then my electrode, we took apart a flashlight, and we put tourmaline crystal in the core, and we passed the electrode through, we drill the tourmaline and put the electrode through the tourmaline. And tourmaline is a magnesium lithium gem. So you're going to get really nice lithium and magnesium ions, and magnesium is good for the heart and the lung and the circulation. And lithium is very good for energizing the body. And then we put the rubies on the face. And rubies or sapphires are amazing. Man-made rubies. I mean, you couldn't afford real ones. I mean, unless somebody's really rich and you want custom real rubies, you're going to spend another $10,000 to get real rubies that size. And right now we're using, I think it's a 12 or 10 millimeter ruby, lab grown from Germany. And my jewelers affirmed to me in every way this is a ruby. And in fact, there's no difference between an optically cleared natural one and these man-made ones. Now you don't go on eBay and buy cheap man-made rubies, because those are garbage. I've seen those. These are made in Germany. Very good quality. So what happens is in Ayurvedic science in India, I saw this documentary about these shaman in the jungles of India that were curing people of cancer and Lyme disease, everything. And in the end of the film, they found that rubies were the most healing of anything, more healing than even the plants in the herb kingdom, or the rubies. And it's not the ruby itself, it's the ruby ion. And what is ruby made out of? Chromium. What does chromium do for the body? It helps you retain water. And if you can retain water and keep your cells hydrated, it's well known that well-hydrated cells don't develop cancer. because what is water? It's hydrogen and oxygen. So you got a power plant, you got your hydrogen, and you got the oxygen, and no virus can live in the presence of good oxygen. So, but there's more properties to the ruby than just the chromium. So we put the rubies on the charge plate, and this is not an electrode, it's a passive emitter. So we're emitting our frequencies through the rubies, the tourmaline, and the magnetic field. The size of the magnetic field coming off the Lightstream wand, which is my invention, and they're made by my jewelers in Sedona, Arizona, is just the size of the magnetic field is way bigger than any Rife machine I've ever tested. Well, it passes, and it depends on the frequencies you're putting into it, because the lower the frequency, the bigger the magnetic field. And that's because lower frequencies are bigger wavelengths. And then you get into higher frequencies, the magnetic field shrinks, but it's more penetrating. Right. So, but the magnetic field can be as high as 4,000 milligauss, and it can be, you know, depending on the frequency, it can drop. But it's still, when it goes into high frequency mode, it's more penetrating to the cells. So you go through Rife's list of frequencies, and you use a signal generating software, and you punch in the number that he says is correct for the disease that you're trying to treat in the body. And then the wand will transmit that frequency into the body. But you're also getting the positive and the negative ions coming off of the rubies and the tourmaline, and also the material itself. I like aluminum as a container because it's paramagnetic. Aluminum is paramagnetic. So I call it the most advanced Rife machine. Of course, everyone's going to get upset when you say that, but nobody has a gem emitter. These are all, you can see these. You see these little plastic boxes? Those are really, really cheap amplifiers. Okay. So you can hear my baby crying in the background there. So yeah, these are, I mean, some of them are better than others. I mean, there's no doubt that some of them, when you get into the more expensive ones, like there's a beam ray right there. Those are really pricey. The beam rays, I believe, are very pricey. And that's a big gas tube emitter. So I'm more interested in the ions, the quality ions coming off of the emitter. I think it's a very old idea. I think gems are far superior to gas tube. Well, one of the first cases was a small child who broke her collarbone, and she lost control of her hand and her arm. And the doctors were going to do nerve grafting. And I told them, you know, this is a serious injury. It's going to take a few months. So don't give up. So you use the wand every day. I had her tape magnets to her arm and fingers, like just, you know, regular magnets, and use the NASA recording of the sound of the sun through the wand. And in 3 months, her fingers were moving again. And then later, her arm starts moving again. So the doctors were amazed. And we've had people with cancer. Again, it seems with cancer, it seems to take about 3 months. You use the wand every day, you know, 34-minute sessions. Sometimes you only have 20 minutes. And after 3 months, we saw cancer markers fall through the roof. I mean, just right down.
It's incredible.
And then, but you know, sometimes the client will go, wow, I'm getting better. I can go back to my old habits. I can drink beer again. I can do this. And then I've seen people, you know, go back to their old habits, and then they start deteriorating again. So there's a whole program you need to go on. Also, another amazing use of the wand is you can take any herbal medicine and put it in a little, you know, fabric sachet and put it on the end of the wand, so that when the magnetic field stimulates the properties of the herbal medicine, it carries the vibration of that plant medicine into the body. So you don't even need to ingest the plant medicine. You just need to tape it to the side of the wand. And, the magnetic field is so strong in the wand that it starts vibrating the properties of the plant medicine and sending it in the form of a wave into the body. The frequencies themselves that I designed, each of the planet frequencies in our solar system naturally corresponds to a particular brainwave set. So you have deep delta brainwaves, which is deep healing and rest. You have theta brainwaves, which is where we dream. You know, Earth is in theta, Mars is alpha. Alpha is really good for coherency and organizing and thinking. And beta is, you know, a lot of the moons are in beta, you know, from the different planets. But the big planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are delta planets. and delta is where most of the healing occurs in the body. There are good studies done at the university level that prove that if you can get deep rest in deep delta, you can heal the body of almost anything. Right. So your body's producing all the brain waves all the time, but it's just that they're very low amplitude when that brain wave is not being exercised. So if you don't have good alphas, you're going to have alphas, but they're not very good. So you could be ADD, attention deficit. So alpha brain waves like Mars are really good for ADD. Mercury is beta, which is really good for ADD. That's super fast, high focus brain waves. So very good when you're on the verge of high mental or high physical activity, beta. And the moon, and one of the proofs to me, evidence wise, that we're being electrically inducted by the frequencies of the 9 planets is when Mercury goes into retrograde. People complain that everything goes haywire in their life, and that's because Mercury is just below 20 hertz at the equator, which Rife found to be the most beneficial frequency to the body. If you go through Rife's book of frequencies, you'll see 20 hertz everywhere. It's good for this, it's good for that, it's good for this, it's good for that.
Right.
So when Mercury goes into retrograde, and 20 hertz is beta, in the beta part of the brain, the upper beta part of the brain, so you see that people lose that ability to be super focused. So why do accidents and things happen when Mercury goes in retrograde? Because you're losing your 20 hertz transmitter, Mercury.
Right.
So there's a reason probably nature does it that way, so that your other brain waves can take over and you can exercise some of the other parts of the brain when Mercury goes retrograde. So when Mercury's retrograde, it's not a good time to be in the super focused mode. It may be a better time for healing and being in a more deep relaxed state. But also when you get a full moon, for example, because the moon is the gamma part of the brain. And why do you stay awake and when there's full moons? Because it's exercising your gammas. The upper part of the brain won't let you sleep. Cheaper than many of the other good Rife machines. So it's even less money, and it has a ruby and tourmaline core emitter, and it has a way better amplifier. You have to have an amp separate. Another advantage to having the amp separate is if the amp breaks, you can always get a new one, or replace the tubes, get it repaired. But with these other machines, if the amp breaks, it seems like the whole unit is pretty much needs to be repaired because it's all one system. The warranty I offer is that if it doesn't work in its natural course, then we will repair it. But if you drop it and shatter, because it's not a glass face, it's a quartz crystal face, because I want the crystal ions on the face of the flashlight tubing, which is protecting the rubies underneath. So you're getting the rubies and the quartz ions. So some people drop it, and we repair that for, up to $200 is what it costs to repair the quartz face. If you don't trip on the cord and yank the cord out, even though it's protected with a boot, I really don't think it's not possible to destroy the coil unless you plug it into an amp that produces so much heat that it melts the coil. And I really don't advise, if the wand gets hot, then you need to, because low frequencies will make the core hotter. So the lower frequencies you would run for maybe 5-10 minutes. That's all you need, 5-10 minutes. It won't break. It'll last 100 years. Rife himself never did more than 20-minute treatments.